imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool, I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Welcome to it, everyone. Tonight's guest, Greg Saunier from Deerhoof, has a part 2 for a part 1 that happened so long ago, it actually seems like it was in a different world in some ways. Yeah, so that's something that is happening. Thanks, of course, to all the Thrash Trapeze Theater folks. Always great times. You can bang yo head if needed. Of course, this show is called Protonic Reversal. Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. And yeah, this is a thing that we do. We talk to people, and it's we use the royal we, apparently. This is the whole situation. So I'm really excited to talk to Greg. Deerhoof's a very interesting band. They're very cool. They follow their own North Star, if you will, as well as making really great music and really interesting. It's a very idiosyncratic, cool, interesting drummer, and a very, a sweetheart of a guy, and real thoughtful. We got into a lot of stuff last time, as what tends to happen with this show is you get, people that are from the Bay Area, going to talk about the Bay Area, how things used to be, how things are different now. And, but we also talked a lot about, a lot about other things. And so we're going to, there's going to be more of that. We're going to talk a lot about Deerhoof music. I realize in retrospect, we didn't get that far into the discography of the Mighty Deerhoof, so we kind of spent a lot of time in the early days, and I think we're going to get more into that now. So, some housekeeping. There's been not been a ton of episodes lately, not as much as I've kind of been doing. That's largely due to, just life concerns, things along those lines. But always appreciate everyone listening, tuning in. Lots of great feedback on the Let's Have a Fab episode, Sid Butler. And, it's something where sometimes I got more time than others. That's really what it comes down to. So, if you've missed it, sorry. If you haven't, not sorry. Anyway, tonight is Greg Saunier of Deerhoof. I'm excited about this. This should be good. Is there anything else to say? The AC/DC special was good, clean fun. Good, clean American fun. That should be heading out soon to the free feeds. Oh, yeah, patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. If you want to get these episodes sooner, if you are looking for a specific episode and you're like, hey, it's not on my thing that does the stuff, that's why. It's in that. And patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. $1 a month will get you there. Helps support the show, pay the bills, all that good stuff. Anyway, we're just gonna get right down to it. I'm looking to see what's on Greg's mind. He's an interesting dude, and there's just been so much that's happened. There's been so much that's happened. Greg, welcome. So I was just thinking about how much stuff that has happened since you were on. Like it's like a different world almost.
You mean since we did the test 10 minutes ago?
Well, no, but I mean since yeah, not that much has changed since then. Yeah,
it's been a busy 10 minutes for me.
Someday 10 minutes seems like 10 years now. No, but last time we talked, I just looked. It was October of 2019. So that was pre-pandemic.
No way.
That was pre-uprising. That was, again, I'm going to harken back and say it was a different world. It's crazy to think that how much stuff has changed just since then.
I mean, yeah, maybe you could, maybe one could faintly glimpse the outlines of some of these possibilities, but it's true. They've come to pass.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, black folks being killed indiscriminately by police officers and large-scale economic desecration was still there.
But we didn't know that one particular murder would, it would stimulate the largest mass movement in American history. Didn't expect that to happen, and that to me is maybe one of the. I mean, that's maybe the biggest news since we talked last time was that large of a popular uprising. But it's I don't know how you felt, and but. And I'm not really sure how everyone's feeling, and everyone's maybe feeling differently, but I'm feeling in a very weird zone about it right now where I've noticed, like maybe just in the past week or so, that it's a bit like, it seems like it's no longer okay to post on social media, defund the police. However, it is okay to comment on someone's post saying you shouldn't have said that in your post. Now, in the comment, they say, of course, I'm for defunding the police, but you shouldn't have put that on social media, which, by the way, I just did in this comment, And there's this funny zone right now where there seems to be a new mass movement. It's not as powerful as the one from the summer, but there's a new mass movement shaming people for posting that they support defunding the police change, but then also kind of in parentheses saying, of course, they also support defunding the police, but we shouldn't be allowed to say that aloud. Because it's not popular enough, and therefore, and even I was watching this. It was Noam Chomsky's birthday a couple days ago, and I watched this really neat. It was from really recently, just a Zoom call that some college students had done with him, and and it's like so much truth is stated so plainly in the interview, but when it comes to that question, at least to me, it becomes, his point of view becomes confusing. He's saying, well, of course that's not going to be a popular point of view, defund the police or abolish the police, and so therefore to say it is to give a gift to the right wing. But then I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but is anarchism, a popular mainstream point of view? Is defunding? I mean, the number of stances that he's taken in his 92 years that were not mainstream left me just on that one point scratching my head a bit. Like, why?
Seems out of character. Almost,
yeah,
right?
I mean, why was it okay to have a dissenting opinion that was not likely to come true anytime soon on all these other issues, but for some reason on that one, it was considered bad form, in his opinion, to state it aloud. And so I still feel a bit confused because of how much right now many of the voices that I trust are not agreeing with each other, I guess. So I feel a little lost about what to do. What is helpful to say and what's harmful to say aloud.
Yeah. So with along those lines, so if the right wing had done it, they called it police reform, right? That's what they would have called it, and because they just excel at the framing of language in a way that makes the terms favorable to them, and that is something where if you stop and think about, what that means, what does police reform mean? You could accomplish the same goals as it's defund the police. Defund the police is more aggressive language,
I guess, yeah.
To some people. But I have noticed what you've talked about, that it's a meta conversation, and it comes back to the thing of like, oh well, we don't. I was all fine and dandy until everybody started rioting, and it's like, well, you didn't like the kneeling. So,
right.
I mean, guess what? Like, the kneeling wasn't so bad, was it? Huh? And it's a kind of ridiculous sort of weasel language, I think, as far as that goes.
Ooh, weasel words. I learned about weasel words on our Wikipedia page.
Wonderful. But
because it was flagged for being filled with weasel words.
That's amazing. So I think it's interesting when we talk about like language being weaponized, and also the idea of, we kind of touched upon briefly, the Deerhoof social media presence, like it's you advocate for the things you advocate for, and you put out information, and there's opinion. You're not trying to fly 50,000 feet above the sky and pretend you're in some aloof ivory tower and not part of the world. And I think that's interesting, because it seems like some artists are still attempting to do that, as if they're like in some parallel universe where these things are not happening or it has no effect on them.
Maybe it's more like, I mean, I know I've felt this way sometimes, where if you're making music or any art format, feeling a little nervous to be either too topical, which can make your music dated, and you wouldn't want it to get dated because you've been raised with the, with the goal or the ideal that your music is better if it outlasts you, and that if it's posthumously respected, and so it feels a little too unambitious to write a song on a current event topic, because it's going to be out of date. But and sometimes also, maybe one can feel that it's related, like, oh, I want to address timeless concerns, in our whatever we do, and so I don't want it to be too wrapped up in 2020, and so I can understand, someone wanting their art or their, whatever it is they're projecting to the world to feel, if not aloof, I mean, at least kind of angelic, and kind of sort of a floating orb or a crystalline orb floating, untouched by the soap opera of human foibles,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually very relatable, and I think that's a good statement for art being art, because I mean, granted, there's some artists like Billy Bragg or something along those lines that kind of melds the two pretty seamlessly. But I don't think the requirement should be explicitly and directly writing songs about like what's happening. But I guess what I'm more talking about is using the band platform to communicate with your fans in such a way that you have like a deep connection about the things that are happening in the world that are beyond the fact that they're a fan of the music of Deerhoof and you guys' art. There's probably going to be an affinity for other things. And I feel like some artists and bands shy away from that, maybe if not for commercial concerns, then just to sort of deny, again, the I am also a human being that lives in the world and sees the same thing that you do kind of inside.
I mean, when we started, maybe this is what we talked about in the last episode, is I think that when Deerhoof started in 94, that was kind of our vibe. We were very shy, and we didn't really know too many people in San Francisco. I think we were secretive, like, a bit like magicians, who didn't want to, reveal our tricks or whatever. And, we sort of coveted seeming mysterious or whatever. But, I mean, that has been one of the joys over the years, particularly when you go on tour, that isn't really so possible anymore, especially if you're doing your own merch table. I mean, you get in conversations with people, and that's one of the things I'm missing the most right now, is just meeting people at the merch table. Because that's where it's like you kind of can't really pretend to be aloof at all. You're just a person, trying to sell some discs,
right,
or some T-shirts.
To put some gas in the van and get down the road and... and as a profit-making entity, there's certainly many things you could do that would, probably make more money. But the idea that you get to have this...
but it also just it started to become more appealing to be a person,
right.
and to have the band be made up of people. With distinct personalities, and we started opening up to like doing more collaborations with other people. So John will do a record with his friend Raven, or I'll mix some record for my friend Balathizer, or this kind of thing. We became more like individual people instead of some mysterious group filled with anonymous.
Yeah. I mean, and as much as, I adore David Bowie. David Bowie is David Bowie because he's David Bowie, and he conducted himself the way that he conducted himself. That involved an air of mystery and kind of, presenting personas and characters that were parts of his personality. But there's no kind of.
Did I ever tell you about meeting David Bowie?
If you did, I don't remember, and that would be astounding because that sounds wonderful. Yeah, please tell me.
Because one year in New York, they had something called the Highline Festival, and he was appointed guest curator. And
oh wow,
okay,
cool.
I guess had seen us play just regular club shows in New York 2 or 3 times, although we'd never met him. But we'd hear about it, like, I think I saw David Bowie up in the balcony, or, this kind of thing. But then he invited us on his festival. And so, we were there at the show. And, maybe it was before the show started, and suddenly he shows up backstage, and we're all chatting, and
wow.
He has learned all our names. He knows all of our names, and introduces himself and says, "Hi, Satomi, I'm David," etc. And he had just come straight from another show at another venue that was also part of the Highline Festival that he curated, and it was, I forget what new music ensemble, but they were playing. There was a composer called Conlan Nancaro who, during the era of the Spanish Civil War, pre-World War II, had gone to Spain and volunteered or something, and then ended up exiling himself to Mexico and divorced from all of his, new music community that performed whatever he was writing. He started writing instead for the player piano.
Oh, wow.
So he composed on piano rolls, where you just you cut out holes in paper, and then that's when the player piano will hit a note. And
right, as
the
roll
music has no dynamics at all. It's all just like banging on the piano.
Right.
But one of the things that he realized he was able to do, obviously incredibly easily on piano rolls, that human performers can basically not do at all, is do hyper irrational rhythms. So it'd be 14 against 17, but taking place in 1 second or something like that. Super bizarre, complicated cross rhythms. And then he sort of, became a kind of legend, and his music for player piano became legendary over the years. And, he just had these home recordings of it that got released on LPs, and it became legendary, but no one could ever perform it. And finally, I suppose, classical performance had become insane enough that some people started to think they might be able to pull off the 14 against 17, and so somebody started making arrangements for chamber ensemble of these player piano pieces. And David Bowie had just arrived to our backstage from such a show, which was a live performance of some chamber music by Conlan Nancaro, arranged for live humans to play. And I'm telling you, it was like, I don't know whether he was maybe in his 60s at the time, exactly how old he was, but it was like talking to a college freshman, the level of excitement that he was just exuding in the room, having seen this Conlan Nancaro thing, was really so charming. And I get your point about how, he's the eternal man of mystery and chameleon-like and always changing his image. But the fact is, in person, what a nut, and so friendly, so charming.
Yeah. A fan of music, it sounds like a
real fan of music, a true fan of music. It wasn't just a way to make some bread, for him. And he was excited because Ken Nordine was going to be the next show that was coming. He was,
wild.
Showing up in town in a couple days. This word jazz guy from maybe the early '60s.
Yeah, where I'm trying to think of where I know Ken Nordine from, but I'm.
Well, he
was
he was famous for doing those
jazzy
one album that was called Colors, and he had this like personality voice, and so there'd be like jazz music in the background. He'd be like olive, or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Really funny record. And David Bowie was so excited that he was going to get to meet Ken Nordine, and I was just like, wow. And it was just an unforgettable, sort of 10 or 15 minute experience that I had, that we all had, that we got to share.
That's
I really don't
cool, man. I mean, that's and it's to a certain degree, like with David Bowie also, there's like he would put on the performance and he would like go be David Bowie, but he's also a guy that is interested in art and interested in music and things like that. It's so neat to kind of see that window into that first. I mean, that's got to be a surreal situation.
Yeah. He was dressed up in a suit. His hair was perfect. I mean, it was surreal because it's like you expect to see, a certain level of heightened beauty on an album cover or in an MTV video, but then when he's standing right in front of you and he's that beautiful, it felt surreal.
Yeah, he's much missed.
Much like you're experiencing with me right now. Hearing my actual voice. I mean, just the amount of beauty that's just pouring out of my throat right now.
It is beautiful, and I'm glad to be talking to you again, because I realized last time we spent so much time talking about old San Francisco and things along those lines, we didn't really get that far into the discography. Like, I think the last thing we talked about was like Half-Bird.
Which one?
Was Half-Bird, which is like
man.
Still like, early times. That's like almost close to 20 years ago, right? That's got to be like 19 years ago, something
It's
like that.
early times, yeah.
So would you mind going through, go through some of the records and talk about the experiences
Ask
you had
me
with
anything.
them? So,
yeah.
It's Reveille. That's how you say it, right? That's how you say the word?
I say Reveille.
Reveille? Okay. Is it Reveille?
Yeah, but that's sort of that's the American English pronunciation of what the bugle blasts first thing in the morning. Yeah. I wasn't going to actually do it, in the interview. Yes.
That's why this show is this show, Greg.
Exactly what melody we're referring to. That's Reveille, yeah.
When we mentioned the record Reveille
in France, they're like, oh, Reveille, they have their own way of saying it. So.
But that was, so at that point, that's John, and Chris.
Yes,
Chris does some extra guitar in there.
No, Chris had not joined yet.
Okay.
The guy called Chris Cooper, who played on one song called Cooper. But that was Chris Cooper, who used to be in Carolina. That's referring back to our last episode.
That's right.
Yeah. Chris was not in the band, although he joined before it was out. We had pretty much, we'd recorded everything, but we hadn't finished the mix. So he was treated in the car, we'd go on tour and the record wasn't officially done yet. Right. He'd be treated to endless, variations of rough mixes like, right. Oh, we need to turn down the snare drum in this song, or, oh, we should cut that song or change the song order. And he was like, what are you guys talking about? This sounds fine. And then we'd be on the next tour and we will have added 10 more overdubs to everything. And he's like, you guys are crazy, just leave it how it was. It sounded fine, And I think that ended up, I think that the first album that we did with him, his point of view there was in response to the obsessive, kind of overdubbing on Reveille. He kind of guided us to do something that was just plain, and live.
Right.
So, like with Reveille, the problem was we had recorded some of the songs. We were basically kind of stealing really short times in a couple different recording studios. One was the now defunct, what's it called? The one, Tiny Telephone.
Oh,
and
yeah, of course.
The one at Mills College, where we just engineered it ourselves. But what we ended up with on these really quick recording sessions was we had to bounce it down at the end of the session. So we didn't have anything to mix. We just had a really, really bad stereo rough mix of like drums and guitar and bass. And then for like 2 years afterwards, we're like, this sounds terrible. This sounds terrible. We can't afford to go to another studio and we have no way to remix it. So let's just find some way to mess with it, we edit out this part and
Right.
paste in some drum samples on this part when the drums get too quiet, and then overdub a guitar in this part or add some key, and it went on, and whatever. I mean, just the way things can when you discover, computer recording or computer mixing, and it just was I think a lot of sanity feels like it was lost in that process. I mean, I guess I could say that about all of them. I mean, we're always so happy about how they turn out, and then that's when we say, okay, it's done. Let's try and put it out ASAP. But the process leading up to it always felt a bit, I don't know. We just felt like we didn't know what we were doing, and stuff sounded really bad to us, and we didn't know how to fix it, and we didn't have help. So we were teaching ourselves, like, okay, what does an equalizer do? What does a compressor do?
Learning the tools with it.
Yeah, learning the tools the hard way, all trial and error, and which is great. I mean, I wouldn't trade it in, I think, but it was also like, sometimes if I have regrets in my life, I sometimes think back to my 20s and how much of them were spent figuring out what an equalizer was instead of doing fun things,
Yeah, like learning this technology that was to achieve the end of doing something cool and accomplishing something, but spending so much time and effort.
I mean, tour
was
always always exciting and a human, but yeah, the recording part of it just always seemed to take too long. The mixing part of it goes faster now, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Reveille is sort of like where the dividing line of, for lack of a better term, where you not got weird necessarily, but like where the recording process became more involved in the music. Like I think the earlier records are just kind of more straightforward, like, not exactly it, but here's a band playing in a room, here's what the songs sound like. And then that's kind of where it seemed like, you would get a glimpse of what was going to come on the next couple records, where you're just like, well, why don't we try, doing
Easy
this?
for you to say. I couldn't get into it.
Yeah, I guess looking back historically now, right? Because I mean, you got like on Reveille, you have like that. I mean, most of the songs are pretty short, but there's that 8-minute one.
But that's the thing; they just kept getting chopped down. They were all long. And we just like, well, that part, the mix didn't work, or somebody hit a bad note, and we couldn't remix it. So we just had to either find a way to cover it up or just edit it out. I mean, the songs got so short. That's another thing, obviously, that happens when you spend a long time reworking something. It's not uncommon for it to just keep getting shortened and shortened and shortened until the song's so short, it's a minute long. Yeah.
So that's interesting that it was basically like a utilitarian arrangement then. like it wasn't like you had this master idea of
desperation.
Okay.
It felt like desperation. I don't know if I feel the same vibe about making music now that we felt then. I think it was really insular, and it was silly, Actually, it's still silly. That hasn't changed, but it was sort of self-absorbed, I guess.
Okay.
I think that one thing that hasn't changed, on any of the records was that I think there was the feeling that this is probably going to be the last one, or this could easily be the last one for any number of reasons. the band could break up, or the label drops us, or or you just can't stand it anymore. You don't like doing it. Like it just feels like too. The result isn't worth the trouble. Like it's cool. Like we're definitely glad when something is done, and we love how it sounds. But you sort of question, like, was it really worth? Like. Sometimes arguing with each other, or or like, or your computer would crash and you'd lose files, or or just the sort of comparing your song to another song that you love. I mean, I remember on Reveille, it was around the time of Amnesiac. And that was the first Radiohead record that I think, it was definitely the first one I'd ever heard. I was not a fan and hadn't ever listened to them before that one. And that was the one. And somehow, I went to, I don't know, whatever it was, Tower Records or something.
Yeah, right.
Heard it at a listening station and
Totally,
thought it was cool. And so we bought it. So I was just kind of A-Bing everything we were doing on Reveille with Amnesiac. And I'm like, well, why isn't our song as loud as theirs? Why does it not have as much emotion? Why does the guitar sound so terrible in comparison to their guitar? Or whatever.
Right. Like you've got the standard for this thing that you're.
I know, but it's not really the most healthy process, to
it's apples and oranges.
To feel like you're competing, regardless of the fact whether the what you feel like you're competing with is so much more funded and supported in every way than what you're doing, sitting there in your bedroom or whatever. But even not counting that, just that kind of. I don't know, the process of spending years comparing oneself to someone else, I think does some kind of inner damage, that is really not necessary, I'm glad people like Reveille or any other record, but I do feel that process is not necessary. And that's something that that's dawned on me over the years, is that, wait, I can let go of that feeling of trying to outdo, whatever was the top thing, that year, or trying to outdo anybody, even just outdo the other band on the bill, like, especially, thinking about 2020, and comparing it to 2000, the difference of mindset. I would not at all recommend, and it doesn't matter because I'm not sure anybody's doing it anyway. I would not recommend approaching music the way Deerhoof did in 2020. I think that communities and supportiveness and backing each other up and letting people be who they are and not having to make everything a battle of the bands struggle for survival is
just being in a band is a battle.
Well, but I mean, it doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
There are, of course, forces in 2020 that are stronger now than they ever were, that force the issue and make it a struggle for survival. It's not just the music industry. I mean, it's our whole society. I mean, if you live in a country that gave up on avoiding the pandemic, you know that you're in a society that has left you for dead. But what do you do therefore? Is the way that you will survive that you simply win against everyone else, or is the way that you survive that you band together in some way, and you accept the differences between people, or thinking in terms of music than in terms of music artists and musicians. Just accept their differences and not have to funnel it into this competition for who's going to get on a label or who's going to get more plays, on streaming or whatever. I just feel that competitive approach seems more like a disgusting relic of the past now than it ever has, and something that if humans hope to continue to have civilization on planet Earth, they're going to have to let go of so much of what seemed absolutely life and death essential, in our own past. And I know that I felt that way when we were making Reveille. It was like, well, we have to make this, this is make or break, like Rob Fisk and Kelly Good quit the band. I can't even keep the band together. John Dietrich has joined, but this is like now or never, make or break, every cliche, of like, we better do this or else, curtains. And and so, that mindset was like, I don't know, I just felt like it sort of took its toll, even though we were happy with how the music sounded in the end.
Well, it's funny you mentioned curtains, because I was going to ask.
And then I joined Chris Cohen.
Chris Cohen.
When he joined Deerhoof, I joined curtains on keyboard, and that was really fun.
Which happened first? Was it kind of at the same time, or?
I think it was simultaneous, yeah. Can't really remember. And we all practiced in the same practice space too. So, and Curtains was rehearsing. If Chris and I showed up first, and the drummer, who was Jamie Peterson at the time, was late, then there was another band that nobody knows about. There was me playing Chris's guitar through Chris's amp, and Chris on Jamie's drums.
Oh wow!
Which was we only had one song because Jamie wasn't ever that late. The song was called Brown Sugar. We were a Rolling Stones tribute band. I was Keith, and Chris was Charlie, and we were the best Rolling Stones tribute band I have ever had. We had no vocals. It was only one guitar, one drummer, but still, it was like carbon copy. Like, I could do Keith so perfectly, and his guitar through his Ampeg amp, I mean, it sounded exactly like Brown Sugar. And then he plays drums exactly like Charlie Watts. Nobody says that, but obviously when you listen to the Chris Cohen records that have come out, the three Chris Cohen records,
you get a feel for that. Yeah, for sure.
You get a feel for that. You can hear that Charlie Watts is very much his biggest influence on his timing and his way of doing fills and the way he records it and mixes it and everything. And it's just the best,
So then, can you speak a little bit to the songs on Abalone then, and how those came together with having Chris in the
Yeah, well, I mean, once Chris joined the band, we just started writing them, and it was a really super creative time period. I mean, I guess there hasn't really been an uncreative time period, but I just remember, John was still somewhat new, and there were still song ideas of his that he'd written before Reveille that, for whatever reason, we weren't able to record, or we played them so badly on the recording that they got axed. And then Chris joins, and Chris is just writing songs a mile a minute. And I mean, one of the first ones that I remember writing after Chris joined was, I seem to remember the same day we were in John Dietrich's living room in West Oakland, and the same day we made up Panda.
Oh, wow.
which was, Tommy made up the Panda part, and Chris Cohen made up the intro, the do-do-do, do-do-do. And then we just put them together, and it was like it worked like magic. And then Satomi made up a different song called Flower, and then that got combined with something. The B part was something John had laying around, and we just suddenly turned that into a song. Like all in like the space of like half an hour, we we had two songs, on Abalone that we ended up playing. We still play them. I mean, and just it was just really, really, really fun, and we. We decided to record it fast. We realized we had enough songs, and we were going to go into a studio in Menlo Park, and our friend Jay Polici was going to record us overnight.
Mighty Dilute of many other things as well.
Exactly. He was going to record us in the middle of the night. When the studio, it wasn't booked, and just do it. We weren't going to pay. He was going to sneak us in there, and so it was all done in one night, except for the two songs at the end, and just everything played live. Vocals were done later, but all the instruments were live. It was again. I mean. As much joy as there could be in the process of writing songs and touring on it later and everything, it's like the actual recording process was so stressful. I mean, I just remember how, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I guess anytime you're doing a band, it's going to be a bit like this, and from experience that, if you're on no budget, it's not like you can come back into the studio tomorrow and maybe somebody's in a better mood or somebody's a little more inspired or whatever. No, we have to nail it right now and move on to the next song. So just
speeding train, and you can.
We were so
be on it or not.
Uptight with each other, trying to get everything perfect. I mean, and for us, perfect wasn't precise. It was more like we wanted to have everything sound like some really exciting take that had some magical some magical moment happened that was just spontaneous and that we didn't predict, and we were trying to get performance of every song that had something really magic like that happen in the middle of it. We're all listening to each other playing and reacting to each other, and we really had a lot of fun reacting to each other. I think we had really nice chemistry, but it's hard. Well, whatever. We had difficulty under pressure. I wouldn't say that we choked under pressure, but I would say it was hard to take chances. We wanted it to sound like we were taking chances and having fun. And of course, it's hard to sound like it's hard to sound like you're having fun when you're not having that much fun and you're actually really like biting your nails and like
you have an imaginary clock in your head that's counting down.
Yeah, it wasn't imaginary. It was a big clock in the studio. But I think it sounded really, it was so cool to record in a studio. And then we got, for the first time ever, separate files that we could mix and, spend the next year mixing it at home and, didn't have to like mix it that night or whatever.
Yeah.
We'd spend some time
Wow, and that was like your fifth album? I mean, technically.
I guess so. I don't know. It depends how you count
Depends
it.
on how you count it. And that's like the first one you basically got to mix the way you wanted to.
Well, yeah. We mixed the 4-track records. Two of the early records were on 4-track, and we had plenty of time to mix them. Years to mix them on 4-track. But this was a nicer recording because it was from a studio, and that was just I don't know if it's nicer. It was just different. It wasn't something that we'd ever done, so it was a new experience. Like get a high fidelity recording, or what's considered a high fidelity recording, very clean, and then be able to figure it out at home. And then we recorded all the vocals at home, and we lived on a noisy street in the Tenderloin, so there's a lot of traffic noise, fire engines way in the background of the vocal tracks, that you can hear sometimes if you listen really closely.
If I'm remembering right, I think the track order is slightly different on the record versus the digital, right?
I think it's different again. Well, there wasn't a record actually; it was CD only. But then a reissue was done only a few years ago.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay,
changed the order a little bit.
Because I remember I was listening to it, I was like, I thought this was later in the record.
Wow, you're a super fan.
I like that record. I think that's one of my favorite records of you guys. So I've listened to it quite a bit, and but then I thought it was like one of those Berenstain Bears things, where are you familiar with this concept?
No.
Oh, geez. Well,
Berenstain. No, I'm not.
So there's this cartoon family of bears, a series of books called the Berenstain Bears.
I mean, that I remember, but what's the concept?
Well, the idea is that like some people swear up and down that the spelling, they remember it differently. And this is like a parallel universe theory thing. Like it's sort of it's a questioning what you see metaphor.
Yeah. No, I understand now. Yeah.
And it's actually, the websites on it are frankly incredible. If you ever just want to break from conspiracy theories that are terrible and awful and mundane. And
we played once at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. It was a very odd gig. There's a physicist who works there, who was a longtime Deerhoof fan, and he's like, we got to get you to come play here inside the premises, in some of the different rooms that we have where we store the supercooling, things and the other machines, and just, really bizarre. But once we played there, the Large Hadron Collider has associated with it a lot of conspiracy theories that proliferate online, where people assume that it's a satanic attempt to cause a black hole where there once was a planet called Earth. And once we played there, we became a topic of the conspiracy theories. And
really?
when I started reading how all of the different reasons that Deerhoof is satanic, I found myself convinced. I mean, it was a Berenstain Bears thing where a member of the target was actually kind of like, wow, this is actually pretty convincing, plethora of evidence here that like
they present a strong argument.
Some strong arguments. Maybe we are satanic. So, every album we've done since then has been, to hail Satan.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, clearly. Wow, holy moly! That's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. Well, but they did it. They unpacked
it. There's also the theory that when the Higgs boson was found, that the act of doing that actually created a parallel world, and some people, of course, I think
you're further up on this than I am even. Okay.
I'm also kind of a nerd about physics, so. And
you be a nerd on this many things, Conan?
Hey, man, follow your bliss.
All right, let's follow your bliss on to the next question.
Yeah, hey. So, all right, so Abalone, and that's it's a well-received record.
Yeah, actually, it was. I think that was the height. I mean, in their own ways, I think all of them, everything that we've done has been surprisingly well received, far beyond my expectations. But that was one where we got good online reviews and year-end lists and stuff, and where it was also a different era where that fact seemed to directly translate into more people coming to the show. or more people buying the record.
Yeah.
Where I think I could be wrong, but sometimes it feels like now it's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more diffuse. And just because you get a good review, in fact, I would say right now, a good review means almost nothing, and in those days, for whatever reason, at least in the whatever realm we inhabited, maybe it was indie rock or noise or whatever it was we were trying to do, underground music. It seemed like reviews counted for a lot then. They were trusted more. They were read more widely. And whatever. I don't know. So we did well with the critics for a couple of years, and that was, we still do well with a lot of critics, but there was that
time period.
Mattered.
Yeah, that early 2000s time period. There was like that moment where it kind of seemed like that's, like there was almost a return to that like lesser Bangsian style form of writing as well.
Yeah, where the writing is more important than the record.
Right. Yeah, and but then by the same token, people would find out about, for lack of, more idiosyncratic or unique bands that didn't sound like other things, in a way that really, on a larger level, that it wasn't as large as like the early 90s or anything along those lines, but in a way that kind of like was like, oh, that's cool. They're there's people like finding out about this kind of music from all over, and
to me it was less about whether it was idiosyncratic. To me, what it was it was a good time in terms of whatever critics. It was a good time if you were a band that had subtexts,
Nuance.
that did context, that did concept albums, or that had hidden meaning in the lyrics, or that was, that seemed to give the impression that there was more than meets the eye, And I think that was something that we were always really into, with other records that we loved, or with movies or whatever, just hidden meaning or multi-layered, or you could sort of like like if I was listening to Amnesiac, during a couple of those years, it's like you can sort of map those lyrics onto, well, is he talking about a romantic relationship, or is he talking about his band, or is it more political? It's kind of like this, like a fairy tale that seems to be both evocative but also general enough that it applies to many life circumstances. And that was something that we were always like fancied ourselves as trying to do. We still do, that we like the kind of whatever, that like a record that might sound different to you when you listen to it again. You hear different things, or you interpret it a different way the second time or the third time, or that at least that it rewards listening to it again. And that's the kind of thing that's like, sort of like tailor-made for music critics, So it was just a lucky coincidence that at the time that music criticism was at a kind of peak, that they happened to discover us, who was trying to do music that appealed to that kind of thinking, or
that kind of attentive listening and repeat listening in a lot of cases.
Exactly. So I just think we got incredibly lucky, it's just pure coincidence.
So then talk to me about the between Abalone and Milkman, because Milkman's a concept record of sorts.
What about
right?
Milkman?
Yeah, it's well.
Say it again.
So isn't Milkman a concept record? Because you mentioned concept records.
Oh,
of sorts.
To me, all Deerhoof records are concept records.
It's something.
Call me crazy.
No.
But I'm
worse than that. I'll call you idiosyncratic, which I consider a compliment, by the way. Well, and I only bring it up because it's sort of like, okay, it's a very eye-catching cover, right? You guys always have very interesting covers, but the
our roommates in San Francisco were living in San Francisco for a year or two from Tokyo. It was Satomi's middle school friend, her childhood friend, had married or whatever, was romantically involved with a visual artist called Ken, and like he lived with us, and he was our great friend, and we were always joking with each other, and he was hearing Deerhoof constantly, and we were seeing his art all the time. He's a really, really funny person, really silly, and just always making dirty jokes, and just everything was sort of the grotesque and crude, with him, and his art was so funny, and so. At some point, we were like, why don't you do the next album cover? And then we realized, why don't we have the album cover first and then make the record after?
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So it's almost like when you have a title and then you figure out what the song is afterwards.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So I don't know if that makes it more of a concept record. I mean, to me, it's like they're all kind of concept records if you want to think of them that way.
Sure.
That they're all grouped around a theme and stuff. But this is just one where we happen to have a character first thing,
Well, and there's in the liner notes, there's kind of like, stuff about that guy, and like it's sort of, I guess it depends on what the listener gets out of it.
Notes? What are you talking about?
Like the isn't there some kind of like
I don't remember.
Well, I mean, there's I'm trying to write. I actually don't know that one on physical. It's been years. Maybe I'm project. You know what? Maybe
some lyric. We put the lyric.
I'm Berenstain Bearsing it. I'm remembering liner notes that did not exist.
You're remembering a triple gatefold, with MTV music video campaign.
That's also I think that's a really interesting, cool record. Also, that's also the first time there's like the electronic drums and kind of almost like synthy stuff going on there. Was that something where? Was that a conscious choice? You were just like, hey, or was it like more like, hey, let's try this?
I mean, we didn't have electronic drums. There were when we were in Tiny Telephone recording a couple of the songs on Reveille, they had a ancient drum machine called the Rhythm Ace that had really cool sounds. It's coveted sounds. So we recorded the sound of the bass drum. You couldn't get individual sounds on it, but you could play some of the rhythm patterns. You play the merengue or whatever, bossa nova, really slow. Turn the speed all the way down, and sometimes you'd get an isolated bass drum or an isolated tom or an isolated snare. And so we recorded that so that we would have it. And then for years afterwards, we just used that Rhythm Ace bass drum and that Rhythm Ace snare drum and that Rhythm Ace tom-tom sound, just pasting them into your recording program to just create a drum beat or whatever. We didn't have electronic drums. We were just pasting in these Rhythm Ace sounds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is that. There's a song called "I Bright Bugler" on Reveille that is those sounds pasted into a little drum beat. And then there's one or two on Milkman for sure. I think at the beginning of Desaparecere starts with those blips, with those Rhythm Ace sounds. But those are just pasted in, But John really liked electronic music, or computer music, I should say. And so when he joined the band, he would sort of create textures, I guess would be a good word for it sometimes, that ended up getting used on songs on Reveille and on Milkman, that definitely we had nothing that sounded anything like that before he joined the band. So that was fun, he could like layer things. There's a lot of keyboard on Milkman. A lot of it was constructed in the computer. Like we did record ourselves one session where we recorded some of the songs with live drums and live guitars and stuff. But a lot of it is pasting drums from samples, pasting bass from sampled bass notes off of some record, and the songs are sort of put together. And even I remember the drums we recorded, maybe after we'd done Abalone, and it's like, oh, it's really easy to record drums, those drums sounded fine. So we can record our own now. And so we got back into DIY recording, and then of course recorded them, and everything sounded horrible, and like the drums all sounded so thin and just like and so it became, that's where we started getting into the another time waster, which was here's the drum performance, right, recorded with 3 microphones or 2 microphones or something. It doesn't sound good. What can we do? Well, I'll take this drum hit off of a Queen record, or I'll take this drum hit off of a, I don't know, something recorded by Steve Albini or something, it sounded really big and powerful. And then paste, sit there and paste. Every time I hit the snare, I'd paste in this drum. I'd line it up, whatever. I mean, way to waste a year of your life, And then, like I said, it's like when the record was all done and it sounded, to our ears like really slick and really fancy and sort of everything in its place and kind of almost garish, like with all the keyboards and it sounds like there's orchestras and
brash. It does have a big sound.
It's like it's just the result of pasting stuff. I had a really funny experience this year, actually. One of the things that we did first on that we attempted first on Milkman was via computer pasting, adding trumpet parts to our songs. So there's a song called Milking that has quite a bit of trumpet on it. And, we didn't know anyone who played trumpet, or we're too shy to ask anyone even if we did, or we thought it would be too expensive. So we thought, as a cost-cutting measure, we would sample trumpet off of a record and use a bit of this note and a bit of that note and some pitch shifting and some fudging and finessing to try and make it sound like a trumpet player was playing the trumpet part that we had in mind, the specific melody that they're definitely not playing on their record, but we with enough samples and fudging and stuff. And it was really hard to find a record that had trumpet solo, and
not
dry.
With drums or other things.
With nothing, just trumpet, isolated trumpet notes. And what we found was, what we used was there was a duet record of Anthony Braxton on saxophone and Wadada Leo Smith on trumpet. And they both played in such a way, Wadada especially is very known for playing in such a way that he leaves an incredible amount of space.
Right. Yeah.
And the record's recorded in this incredibly dry, it's not a concert hall. They didn't add reverb, it's just like this totally dead sounding room or studio or whatever. And they play this incredibly minimal music. So there's lots of chance to find isolated trumpet notes. So that's how I constructed that. That was the first time. And then for years afterwards, I kept using Wadada trumpet samples to construct trumpet parts for Deerhoof records. And then later in life, we performed with Wadada Leo Smith in concert. And in 2020, our live record came out this past summer that we put out to benefit Black Lives Matter. And it's on Bandcamp. And we did an interview much like this one for some online interview or whatever after the record came out. And 2 years after we had played the show together, so we were kind of reuniting in conversation. And I hadn't even had a chance to tell him the night of the show because I was, frantic and,
you
busy.
Got other things in your mind.
Blah, blah, blah. We were playing a show, I finally got to tell him, how we've been using his trumpet samples for years to construct our trumpet parts or whatever. And it was so funny to reveal it so many years after the fact. But
what was his reaction to it? Did he kind of get what you were?
Like his reaction to everything.
Yeah.
Just, such cool, kind of like nothing surprises him. He would laugh and he would, just be, he's like ready for anything. I mean, that person has taught us, and, for those familiar with his music or who've ever had a chance to work with him, as a student or a performer in one of his groups or whatever, so much about how music can be a practice for not just music, but a practice for being a life form on the planet, and how to accept whatever comes when you're playing music that involves, people doing something other than just playing their part, and there's room for the spontaneous, then being ready for anything. It was, and that's one of the reasons that it was such a treat to play with him, and what ended up coming out on this live record this year. Just that, like, he even deliberately showed up late and missed sound check, so that to, in order to prevent him knowing what we were going to play. And he didn't know our songs at all. So walk on stage in the right mindset, and Deerhoof starts playing their songs.
Right.
Much of the audience knows Deerhoof songs. Deerhoof knows Deerhoof songs. Wadada has never heard them in his life. And he starts playing in a way that's so powerful and so expert and so kind of commanding that Deerhoof must adjust on the spot. So he's rewriting the song on the spot and forcing us, he has that presence that says, we're slowing down now. Now we're going to get quiet. Now we're changing to this feel. And the four of us, John, Ed, Satomi, and me, suddenly hearing our own song fresh for the first time and playing them in some way that totally unlike we had ever played them before, and how exciting that was, that he had taught us something about ourselves, about our own music, and how profound, of an experience, so grateful. It was another really lucky and unexpected case of meeting a musical hero, kind of like the Bowie thing. It just, you never expect it. You never dream it. And
he did that really cool record with Henry Kaiser that was like the Miles Davis, like
exactly,
the 70s Miles Davis.
Miles,
I forget what it was called.
Yeah.
Oh, Yo Miles, that's what it was.
Yeah. That was a band that he had for years. Yeah. Maybe he still does. I don't know.
Yeah, it's that's awesome. I like how he's just kind of nonplussed about you taking his stuff and forensically reassembling it in your album. That's kind of awesome.
Man, that was Milkman. That was Green Cosmos too. That was the next thing that we put out as kind of a mini album. It was like maybe 25 minutes long or something. Not quite a full album, but that one we recorded with Eli Cruz over in Oakland at New Improved.
Right? Yeah.
But still, even that again, recorded like in one afternoon or something, really fast, and kind of like these sounds need some help, and just spending so much time pasting in samples, pasting in.
Right.
I mean, I think Green Cosmos is where we hit the climax of that, of pasting in samples, and just the sort of tedious. I mean, now a lot with, and maybe even then, but we just couldn't afford it or didn't know about it. But it's definitely much easier now. Like now there's a program.
Yeah, now exactly. Now there's things.
Replace your drum sounds. You just press a button and you've replaced your drum sound with any drum sound you can afford.
There's a workflow, and like what you did in a year, you could do in like 5 minutes with a few menus, right?
But that's just it, Conan. I have to say, it wouldn't quite be the same.
No, absolutely not. No.
There is a workflow that would, quote unquote, on paper do something basically the same thing, which is replace drums or add samples to drums, or add a lower octave to the bass, or whatever kind of stuff, or pull down some menu of like a percussion loop in the background that you can play along with. But there's something. For better or worse, there was a quality that results from having to do it in a sort of handmade style and one sample at a time, and like lining up the waveforms so that they're in phase, and maybe not on this one hit. This one hit sounds cool without the sample, and making a separate decision on every single hit.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. And it was just like, I don't know. So, if I heard Green Cosmos now, I think that a lot of what I'd hear, like it sounds very glitzy and fun and layered, but it also sounds, I don't know, it was like a very tedious, time-consuming labor of love, process.
Well, I'm thinking of that. I can't remember the song right now, but there's a Queen record where to emulate the sound of an orchestra, they recorded a single guitar note just like an absurd amount of times because they had, all the time in the world to record a record, and they could just do that. But,
I mean, he overdubbed single note guitar stuff on tons of songs.
But but if you listen to it, it actually it sounds like an orchestra, but it sounds different because obviously that's a crazy way to do that. Why don't you just get an orchestra?
Right.
But
he's got that infinite sustain,
Yeah.
compressed guitar, so he can sort of hold a note, maybe feeding back, and so like a string player or something, you can sort of hold a note infinitely, and then just, and then he had obviously that very eccentric kind of tone, that had a lot of sizzle to it.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a bow across a string, And so when it's just holding infinitely, you can imagine it sounding a bit like a cello or something. And then you just like overdub, a whole bunch of those so that you get, I mean, my record was always News of the World. I think that was my first LP, actually, when I was a child. That was my very first record.
When I was a kid, the album cover used to scare me.
Oh yeah,
Which I think it's awesome now, but
and it's just kind of like I couldn't for the life of me understand. Like I heard "We Will Rock You" and "We Are the Champions" on the radio, which was at least where I lived, was always played as a twofer.
Yeah, like
which
together.
Was so bizarre, Is like you played the single, which meant you played both sides of the single in a row every time.
Sure.
It was wild, And I loved it so much and had the record, and I think my babysitter gave me the record, actually.
That's amazing.
They didn't want it anymore. And but I couldn't for life of me figure out why a band that made such great music, would do such ugly cover or just a horrific sort of
it's like a sci-fi book, I think, or something, right?
Yeah, but it was gory and bloody, and the band is dead on it.
It scared the hell out of me when I was a kid.
Exactly.
I was freaked out.
So why would they do that? And then the other thing I couldn't understand is why they would do a song called "Sheer Heart Attack," which comes right after We Are the Champions. So it's the next song. I'm listening to bopping along to my two favorite songs as a kid, and then this song that I just despised. Sheer Heart. It was like fast. It sounds like a Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin, but it's kind of like a little bit punk rock. Maybe just right before punk rock became a big thing. Really up tempo, super fast. Just kind of like it's almost just one A chord through the whole song. Really distorted guitars and and it just seems so rude, and I just couldn't, as a kid, I could not figure out why they would do this. And I remember my mom had some whiteout. And for a little while I was obsessed with whiteout. I thought it was so cool that I could erase like something that I had typed on a typewriter with whiteout. Yeah. And I actually took the LP and I whited out the song. I wanted the song. I hated it so much. I wanted it to disappear from existence so radically that I whited out the song. I was attempting to delete it from the LP. And and of course, as these things do, in life, and music is always a great case of how this can happen, where the song that you hate the most at first becomes the song that you love the most later. And of course, Sheer Heart Attack is one of my absolute favorite songs in the universe now, and a real Deerhoof model, for like how to make stuff sound. And like I said, many an hour was spent pasting in Queen, Roger Taylor, Queen snare drum samples into Deerhoof songs to make it sound more like Queen, and there's one hit. There's one place on that record. It's in Get Down, Make Love, where there's a drum fill that happens without anyone playing, where he just hits the snare drum, bum, 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 and then the band comes crashing in. And so that's the perfect place to grab a single snare hit. And that one Queen snare hit, I mean, I can't tell you how many Deerhoof songs have had their snare drum beefed up by that one hit of Roger Taylor. That one swing of his arm has like been years of Deerhoof content,
Well, if you ever run into him, you've got a great icebreaker. Roger Taylor.
I mean, he knows it. I mean, he knows how many bands have been influenced.
I'm sure.
I mean, that's not going to mean a thing to him,
But I think it's fascinating that I think that the way that you assembled that record and the way that you kind of painstakingly went in, note by note, hit by hit, even as labor intensive as it is, it makes it a very unique sounding record. Like it's a record that.
Thank you.
It's first of all, it's good. So I mean, we'll start there. But like it's unique. Like because just based on the method of, I guess you would call it production, but it's just it's like,
you can barely call it production. I mean, because there was another aspect in Milkman and
the
EP Green Cosmos. I'm sitting here telling you,
come see the duck.
I'm telling you how much it was all about layer after layer after layer. But we were using the free version of Pro Tools as our music recording software at the time. We could not afford Pro Tools. And so there was a free version you could download. And the problem with this free version is 8 tracks maximum. That's it. So what that meant is, I mean, when 8 tracks is still a lot, but once you're trying to pile on, probably the song that has the biggest pile is the song Green Cosmos. No, that's not true. Maybe there's one called Spiral Golden Town. It was another one that had trumpets, pitch shifted, sampled trumpets or whatever. It's all constructed. Both of those, so many layers. And the problem was, at least, working on it at the time, the problem was once you hit 8 tracks, you had to bounce it down to 2. And you could add 6 more and then bounce it down and then you could add 6 more. So then it was impossible to go back
Yeah, you better be
to
darn
the
sure of the
original.
stuff that you bounce down, though, because you're not
Or
going
I
to change
delete it
yeah.
because room was running out on my computer. So, it was coming back to this thing of I had this stereo bounce that after listening to it for 4 months, I realized this stereo bounce isn't good. It doesn't good. I wish I could have mixed it a different way, but now I can't. And so I've got to cover it up in some way or doctor it in some way to hide its flaws or beef up its thinness or whatever it was. So that was another part of it. It wasn't like we had it wasn't like we were Prince in a giant studio with an infinite number of tracks. We had an infinite number of tracks, but only if you kept bouncing down. And so you were stuck with whatever bizarre mix you were in the mood to make that day. I don't know. I think that again, we kind of hit a wall on Green Cosmos. We need to do something different. This is too, why can't? It's like when we would go on tour, it would be so fun to play the songs. It wasn't painstaking at all. It was the opposite of painstaking. It was pure joy to play. Why can't we get that joy on the record? And so that's why we're like, okay, we are not doing this anymore. We're not going to do this. We are going to rent a rehearsal. We're going to stop doing these makeshift recordings too. We're going to stop doing this thing where we record the whole record in one afternoon and then, suffer for the following year trying to fix every flaw, that one afternoon produced. We're going to take our time. We're going to rent a practice space, and in Oakland, it was one of those ones in West Oakland where where there's a 200 practice room.
Yeah, like that would have been Soundwave at the time, I think.
I think it was Soundwave, yeah. So we moved into Soundwave. We moved all our instruments into Soundwave. We had a monthly thing, and we stayed in there for about 5 months. And we went in there like, I don't know, whatever, like a regular job. And we were at least 40 hours a week. Every morning, we'd get on the BART. We get a show up first thing in the morning. Everybody's so tired. And we just start pounding on the drums. Okay, what's your idea? And it was Chris and John and Satomi and me. And I seem to remember that it was over the winter as well. And I admit that Bay Area winters are not. You're living in the Midwest now, so
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Studying
not the
contrast.
harshest winter ever, but still, it was cold, and it was a windowless room. It was a strange place to spend 5 months of your life, but.
It's almost stranger when it's empty than when there's like 20 minute bands playing, It's has an eerie sort of feel to it.
Yeah, I mean, it was eerie and, had only each other for company for most of that time. And just obsessively retaking songs again and again and again. And just recorded so much stuff. That's why it ended up being double record, The Runners 4. It was all 100% recorded in that practice space. And it has a really sort of crappy dead sound on the drums. But one of the reasons that the guitars sound so nice, and it was Chris Cohen switched to bass and Satomi switched to guitar. So the guitars are Satomi and John. And one of the reasons the guitars sound so nice is that we bought those amp simulators. We were sick of failing to record good guitar sounds. Years of just like not ever feeling like the guitar sounded. We couldn't ever get a recording of a guitar sound that sounded as good as it sounded in real life, it seemed like. We just couldn't do it. And we were like, let's just buy a pod, So we got this amp simulator. So we were all on headphones, and John and Satomi were plugged into pods and getting simulated amp tones. And so then you're in headphones, and we didn't have to record a crappy sound and then spend a year mix it. We could spend the time first getting the sound, and we would design really, really unusual, what we thought were unusual, really fun guitar sounds with strange delays and wah-wah pedals and all this stuff, that we didn't have, but it was in this simulator. And and just record it straight in the computer like that, and then that's the sound, and then you didn't have to mess with it so much. You didn't have to cover it up, and it was just like that's the sound, and so in a way that was really a pleasure. But we also, started to get at each other's throats. Instead of recording in one afternoon and feeling stressed out, it would be all day, every day. Together.
Put that stress in a payment plan. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, that became the last thing that we did with Chris. Yeah. And we toured after it, actually. I mean, so that wasn't the last. That was the last record that we recorded, but it wasn't the last thing we did. We toured, and it was always really, it was fun to play those songs. But it was, it was the same. It was just, and I think Chris maybe understood that better. Well, no, actually, Satomi did too. I think it was me who understood it the worst. But I think that Chris, he came into the band saying, guys, what are you doing? Come on, this record already sounds fine. Put it out. I'm talking about Reveille.
Yeah.
And by the end of Runners 4, had kind of fully, he might tell the story differently, but my interpretation is that he, ended his time in Deerhoof having fully converted to the obsessive overwork.
The other way around, yeah.
Not the other way around. We were all in it together. And I think that part of it was realizing, can't the process be a little bit, whatever. The process can be whatever it is, but can't I have a few more hours to live, to just have a little bit more of a life and not devote. Everybody can do a residency, or they can do a thing, a retreat or something where you say, I'm going to forget everything. I'm going to a monastery and I'm going to live like a monk for 2 weeks, right. And put the rest of my life aside and focus on this. But when you've done that now continuously for, whatever, 5 years straight, which was the time that he was in the band approximately, he was right. It was too much obsession, and there were sacrifices getting made. And, I just remember, I'll go to the grocery store and get food later, I've got to get this mix right, and I feel like it's almost right. And, it's like, it's a pleasure to go back and listen to those records, but I'll be honest, sometimes I get a little bit tearful remembering those times, because it's just, I feel like such a fool, and Chris and I still talk about it sometimes. It's like, the records sound really cool, but it was like a dark path in a way, and it became almost darker over time, because Deerhoof was doing this in part because we had no budget, because we couldn't sell very many records, and or at least we didn't want to ask labels. It was Kill Rock Stars at the time for all of those. For an advance, like other bands do, we want a recording advance, because we really needed the expenses to be low so that we had some hope of making an income from the record after the fact. And and so we're like, no advance. We're going to do this all ourselves. And what we could have spent money to have a producer or a helper, to do it better, we're going to just do it. We're going to substitute time, hours, we're going to substitute hours. And the thing is, what Chris pointed out to me years later, which I think he's really right, is that the idea of the DIY band that records on a $0 budget, finishes a record, and then sends it to a label and says, "Hey, you want to put this out," has become the norm. That's become expected. Is that it's the band's responsibility to shoulder all costs and all effort, and that anything beyond that is considered like, oh, only celebrities, get a budget,
What's up, Rockefeller? Yeah, exactly.
yeah, exactly. And so Chris feels a little bit guilty that Deerhoof was one of the causes of this change of paradigm, that because we volunteered to do everything for free, that labels began to obviously it's not just because of Deerhoof, but that we were just part of a movement that ended up resulting in labels expecting bands to do everything for free.
Yeah, and that's it is funny when you talk about shifts in culture and how things have changed. Yeah. You're right. It's sort of like there's almost this, oh, you don't record, most of your stuff? Like, oh, why not? Why wouldn't you just learn to go do that? And, you want to go into a studio? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, I want it to sound good. I've got a vision for this. Come on. Which isn't to say that home recordings can't sound good. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that it's interesting that, like, to watch that shift being like, oh, kind of like, push your nose up at home recording, whatever, to being like, no, of course everybody does that now.
It's pretty much what we knew. And I just remember at the time feeling very depressed about it. I would always be happy with the record, like I said. I thought the record, we loved our records. We didn't deem them finished until we loved them, but I remember feeling depressed, like I am spending year after year teaching myself the most useless
non-transferable skills. Yeah.
Keystrokes on the computer in Pro Tools, or like how to make Satomi's voice sound good in a Deerhoof mix, all this stuff that seems completely irrelevant to the rest of the universe, And I'm like, boy, I'm teaching myself useless skills. And it's been in more recent years that I think, especially John and Chris and me, who were the most involved with the sort of, recording, engineering, mixing, mastering, minutia, that we were all like just hitting ourselves over the head, like, what are we doing? We are wasting our lives learning this stuff. That there's been some relief in recent years where we've all started to record or mix or master other people's music. And people have started hiring us to do that. Or we do it for friends, for free or whatever. And we realize, well, maybe it wasn't for nothing. We're going to make it not be for nothing, because we're going to share, whatever totally self-taught, backwards workaround kind of skills that we taught ourselves over those years. We're going to spread them, and we're going to make use of them, and try to bring some benefit to someone besides ourselves, for having
non-transferable skills that.
yeah, exactly. They seemed non-transferable, but they turned out to be transferable. And that has been a really gratifying life change. We couldn't see it at the time.
Right, of course, because it's later on down the line, it becomes more apparent. So then Chris leaves the group.
Chris left, and we had John's old friend Ed Rodriguez. John had played in bands with Ed, 2 different bands with Ed back in Minneapolis.
Yep.
Called and like skin graft bands.
Great band, actually.
We all knew Ed really well. He had moved to the Bay Area, and he was our friend. We saw him all the time, and actually we had been on tour with him when Chris was in the band because we'd done a Europe tour where Deerhoof was opening for Gorge Trio, which was John, Ed, and this guy Chad.
Yeah. I remember that now.
It was Deerhoof's first European tour. Which
was basically, if I remember right, it was most of Colossemite, right? Like it was most everyone from Colossemite.
Well, this was Gorge Trio, which was like a spin-off of Colossemite that was even more obscure.
Yeah, no, Gorge Trio, because I saw Gorge Trio, but I remember it being like most of the guys from Colossemite played in Gorge Trio.
Yeah, it was 3 out of 4
out of 4. It was everyone but Nick,
it was minus the vocalist, it was just instrumental. And a really
I think I saw him with you guys, actually, now that I think about that.
Yeah, exactly. The first time I saw them was when we were opening for them on this European tour in probably 2003. It was Abalone tour. And, Chris was still pretty new in the band. And we were on tour in Europe in February, really cold. Ed took video every night of Deerhoof on that tour. And since 2003, 17 years, we have been pestering Ed Rodriguez, one of my best friends, my bandmate, one of my closest. Ed, when are you going to digitize those stupid videos? I want to see what that tour looked like.
Yeah,
and he finally did it last week. He did it last week.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he sent it.
That's awesome.
And I'm looking at these videos now after 17 years. And all I remember at the time was, I'm really sad he videotaped this because we're playing terrible every night. And I'm watching these videos and they're so funny. And there's actually, they're really, really fun to watch. And I'm making an edit of kind of like, we were playing more or less the same set list every night, but I'm trying to find the best version of Panda and the best version of Dummy Discards a Heart and the best version of Come See the Duck and all that kind of stuff.
Well, because it wasn't like how it is now, where everyone just has an amazing video camera in your pocket that takes high definition video. It was a little more of a rare thing back then.
But the weird thing is that for some reason, a lot of cell phone video stuff that you see online, I see it on YouTube. The sound is often really blown out and terrible, but the sound is not so distorted on these. I'll probably eat my words if I ever put any of this online. People will be like, what are you talking about? But for some reason, it doesn't sound as bad as the stuff that's recorded on itself, like a really loud band.
Any loud band with just concert video, unless they have some kind of outside mic or something, it generally sounds pretty bad.
Or if they have a way to control the input. Maybe Ed had a sound input knob on his video camera or something.
Yeah, that's probably it.
It's really funny, grainy videos. Anyway, so in any case, we already knew Ed well, and we had been on tour with him. We were all in the same van on that tour, so we knew we could get along with him. There was no question. So we did. Actually, first we did another. We did
Friend Opportunity, right? Yeah.
Trio. Yeah. So I guess we struggled through that for a while as a 3-piece. I don't know what we were thinking, but. Well, I guess Ed was busy. He was playing in XBXRX. He was playing Flying Ludenbachers. He wasn't available.
He was pretty busy around that time. Now that you say that aloud.
Yeah. That's why we didn't ask him, is because he wasn't available. So Deerhoof, one of the incredible things in my, reminiscences of that time, around 2007, when Friend Opportunity came out and we were playing those songs on tour. One of the things as we were finishing Runners 4, we got a random email saying, would you be available to open for Radiohead? And we had some difficulty actually figuring out if that was going to be possible. And And then Radiohead was like, never mind, we've got too much gear. and we're playing kind of smaller stages than we normally play, which of course was like,
for them is like
Greek theater,
exactly.
like
Biggest shows in the world for us.
But for them, it was a slight underplay. That was going to sell out overnight or whatever. And they're like, there's no room for another band. And Chris had just quit. And we're like, basically wrote back an email. It's just 3 of us. John's got a single 12-inch cabinet. The drums are the bass drum of a Pearl Rhythm Traveler, which is, 5 inches deep or something, and one snare drum, and that's it. And then we can set up in the front 4 feet of the stage. If you have 4 feet empty in the front of the stage,
we can do it, Radiohead.
and then they wrote back and said, okay, you're on. And we drove in to the first show, which was Berkeley Greek Theater, in a Prius. The backstage load-in area. They didn't believe. We were like, no, we're the opening band. Radiohead obviously has a lot of obsessed fans who are trying to sneak in, and we're like, no, we're not. We're the band, and they wouldn't let us in. They couldn't believe we were a band in that car. And
where's your crew? Where's your?
We rented a Prius for the tour. We rented a Prius. I think none of us had cars. Maybe John had a car, but he didn't trust it to make it all the way to San Diego or something. So we rented a Prius for the tour, and it was an incredible experience where the band that you had been unfavorably comparing yourself to and trying to master your records to, and that you had done so much self-destructive, psychological, imposter syndrome, negative comparisons to musicians who you thought were better than you, turn out to be watching you from the side of the stage every night and going crazy, and that it was, it's just very touching and again, kind of surreal moment where you realize that in years where, I'm not going to say that Deerhoof's only purpose was to match up to Radiohead. It was not our only purpose, but among the many things that we were trying to do was trying to create musical responses to some of our favorite music, and particularly, current music. And 2 of our biggest musical heroes were the Roots and Radiohead, and we were always listening to their music and comparing ourselves to it, and to think that, like, even if they didn't hear us, we were trying to write music that somehow responded to their music and one-upped it. We imagined ourselves, as being in conversation with them, right, even though that was a ridiculous, absurd fantasy. And then at some point, those fantasies, they turned out to be true, and that they were hearing our responses to their music, and then they were making music. And I can't say for sure that any particular Roots song or Radiohead song is, reminiscent of Deerhoof, but sometimes I, think I hear it, now and again.
Yeah. Sure, of course. And nothing happens in a vacuum.
Bangers and Mash on the record that they did right after that tour, In Rainbows. That it's not on In Rainbows. It's on the In Rainbows kind of extra disc or whatever. But Bangers and Mash, it was one they were playing a lot on that tour. Really cool song. And I always kind of wondered if maybe, it was a little bit of a Deerhoof imitation. But, and to realize, in person, they weren't, they weren't the Mount Rushmore, or they weren't the ogres, that I might have imagined. That they were so funny and so sweet and so kind and helpful. I mean, on tour, I mean, every day we were just, John's pedal would break, or, I mean, my drums were taped together with duct tape, and we're sitting there playing gigantic audiences, and it's Radiohead audiences too, so they're listening. It's not like they're just milling around, going to the bathroom, drinking beer. It's like, they're like
attentively listening to every note. Yeah, exactly.
Listening to every note. So we're just like up there, like trying so hard to to not like bomb, and and stuff's breaking, and like it's not just the band. I mean, the Radiohead crew was like also watching our show like hawks, and like something would go wrong with John's guitar, and like Johnny Greenwood's guitar tech would run out onto the stage and like fix it.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
Like, what is happening right now,
Yeah.
And then at the end of that short tour of California, they invited us on another leg in Europe, and we couldn't afford to bring someone to mix our sound, so their front of house sound, who by now knew all our songs by heart and everything.
Yeah, seen it every night, sure.
He mixed us, no problem,
That's awesome.
And it was like brilliant. And then Johnny Greenwood did our light show on the one indoor show that we did at the end of that in Amsterdam, the Heineken Music Hall. He put on a hoodie so that no one would recognize him, and stood back at the light board, and he knew every one of our songs. I mean, we've never had a light show like that, because he knew exactly when it was going to kick into this part, when the whole audience was totally lost, and he'd throw on the strobe at just the right moment, and when you go in a fast part or something. And there was another show where there was a day off in the Radiohead tour, and we booked a show of our own in a tiny club in Edinburgh. And we had sound check. We were frazzled, stressed, we went out, quick dinner. We didn't have much time. We had to get back to the show. We were illegally parked on this cobblestone street in Edinburgh, and we felt like we had to get back in a hurry. We went to this restaurant. We're like, oh no, they don't have anything vegetarian for us. And we suddenly, just sheer luck, looked up, and there was a sign, vegan, restaurant. We're like, thank goodness. And we walked in, we're like, quick, let's order something. We walked back, sit at a table, and there are Johnny Greenwood, Thom Yorke, and one of their tour managers eating dinner at this vegan restaurant.
Right.
And we go and sit down. What in the world are you guys doing here? and Tom rolls his eyes and says, well, Johnny is playing this like Irish music gig tonight, and he roped me into coming to watch. And then Johnny rolls in his eyes and said, well, actually, it was this other guy who roped me into doing the Irish music gig, and I don't really want to do it. And then I'm like, well, have fun. We're playing, down the street at this other place. We had a nice little visit, and it was just like so funny and just out of the blue. And then we go play this show, and we think we're not playing very well, and we think we're not having such a good show, but man, there's a ruckus happening in the audience. It's like almost like a mosh pit, Like, man, I didn't know we had these kind of fans in Edinburgh.
Yeah,
it wasn't in Edinburgh. It was in Dublin. I have it wrong. We were in Ireland. It was in Dublin. I remembered it incorrectly. Edinburgh was the next day. That's why it was an Irish music gig. We were in Dublin. And, we'd never been to Ireland. And but then we looked out. After a few songs, we realized what was going on. It was Thom Yorke dancing like a madman to our show. He had bailed on the Irish music gig and watched our show instead, and was the only person in the audience who knew how our songs went. And
he was opening the pit up.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. And so he was like crashing into people, and just like it was so funny. And after the show, we went back to the merch table, and he was like there, like totally drenched in sweat. He's like, "Oh, I really enjoyed myself." Such a funny person. Anyways, very, very. every one of them very sweet, and a great memory from Friend Opportunity era. But it was that tour, I mean, not just the Radiohead shows, but all the shows where we attempted to play those songs as a trio were a real struggle. I don't know. I mean, it's just like the new songs, the songs on the record had so many keyboards and,
there's
layers.
a lot of layers to it. There's only 3 people.
Just going through his mind trying to cover everything at once.
Yeah.
And some songs, Satomi wanted to dance, so he was having to do the bass on the guitar, plus the guitar parts on the guitar, plus keyboard parts and stuff. It was really funny. Quickly we were like, we need to get a guitar player. And just by sheer miracle, Ed suddenly quit both of his bands. We're like, what? Really? He's available? We're like, we had a 3-way, we had a band meeting, should we ask Ed into the band? And 5 minutes later, we were decided that definitely we're getting Ed in the band.
Yeah.
And then John called up Ed, hey, do you want to go out to dinner tomorrow? And then, 24 hours later, Ed was in the band. And then, it's just been like, that was 2008, 12 years ago.
I was going to say,
it's
it
been
seems to have worked out.
Worked out so well. I mean, I don't know. We've just all become so much closer, and I just, Ed brought I don't know. Ed is different than anyone else, and different from us, and I don't know what the difference is, but it's just he immediately was very fun on stage, and Satomi had someone that she could interact with a little more.
Yeah, the live vibe, speaking as somebody from the outside of it, the live vibe became more of a show, almost, if that says not that it wasn't a show before, but meaning there was
but it's different. I mean, there was a showiness to it that Ed picked up on from Satomi and added. But he always had, that was always part of his thing too. He always dressed up in suits when he'd play with Ludenbachers or something. And eventually he started sewing his own outfits, and every tour he'd have a new outfit. And he still does that. And we'd always be like, I can't wait to see what he came up with this time. And he'd literally be sewing after sound check. He wasn't done with it.
I didn't realize he made them himself. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, he'd walk on stage, and we would finally see for the first time what his outfit was going to be for this tour. It's like totally insane. He always says that the first show he ever saw was Liberace. He went with his mom to see a Liberace show it was one of these where he was doing classical hits like Blue Danube Waltz and stuff like that, but it had fountains on stage, fountains that were timed to go with the music. And I think ever since, and it seems to be kind of true, ever since then, he's
sort of
just very glammed out and
yeah.
very, and there's something of the pleasure in being somewhat artificial about, I think that, put it this way, Deerhoof, when I look at pictures of me, Rob, and Satomi in 1995, it's like it was as far from glam as you can get. Nothing was artificial. Everything was so earnest, and it was just jeans, t-shirt, flannel, whatever it is, like not thinking about that, just in sound world, audio world, only thinking about the music. But it's more than that. It's not just a negation of visuals, because both Satomi and Rob were and are visual artists who did think visually, but it had more to do with the always earnest and direct approach that we tended to take with everything at the time, and the secretive approach that we took to everything at the time. And I think that when Ed joined, we started to enjoy, the artificial more.
Kind of lean into it as a thing, yeah.
Yeah, and to play act more. I noticed that my own performance style changed a lot in the years after Ed joined. I became more self-conscious, and as a way of being fun, to be more hammy, or to play tricks on the band or play tricks on the audience more often, and to I don't know how to explain it, but I just think that Ed's influence, created something of, and Camp came into the band more. I think that Camp was always part of the band. We were always deliberately bad. I mean, I think that that's an element of noise music in many cases, particularly, kind of first wave original noise.
Like Shags and Shaft,
it was meant to be ugly. It was meant to be destroy music, so it was bad on purpose. And that kind of humor has always been in Deerhoof. But I don't know, whatever. Once I joined the band, it was like we found a new way to embrace that humor, and I think that it's become, I don't know, the band has become more loving and more fun. We always had fun. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify, but it's just become, and we've also still had our struggles and difficult times, since 2008. But yeah, it's just been, I don't know. I'm very, very grateful because that's the period that we're still in. And I sometimes can't believe that we're still together and we seem to enjoy it more now than we did, It's more fun now. We did Offend Maggie first, and we went back to Tiny Telephone for that one, actually, for the final time, recorded everything there. And maybe even had a couple days,
Right.
Like we really pushed on it. And I still mixed it at home, but like we didn't do the panic rush thing,
which is kind of the beginning of that era. And amazingly enough, I'm gonna have to have you on again to talk about it because
because we're at 2 hours.
Because we're at 2 hours, and we've already talked about so many amazing things. But I'm very glad that we're at least starting to get into almost this decade. And
2021.
I will make it a year and a half before the next one, for sure. Greg, it's been so great talking to you, man. Thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for letting me ramble on.
And let's let's do this again soon. Hope
Sweet.
I always enjoy hearing from you, and I want to get into the latter-day stuff as well. And just really appreciate you and everything you do, man.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much for keeping in touch and reaching out, finding me again.
I'm good with that.
Next time we'll talk about what you've been up to more.
No, we won't.
It's
not interesting. Nothing.
Thank you, Conan.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Stay warm. Stay healthy.
All right, take care, brother.
Bye.
Bye. There he goes, Greg Saunier of Deerhoof. That was awesome. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. This has been Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. I'm going to try to have him on again soon. We'll get even further in discography. All right, let's hear a Deerhoof song. We talked a lot about the Chris Cohen era, so let's listen to something. Let's listen to Panda, Panda, Panda. Here we go. Deerhoof, Protonic Reversal.
how beautiful a place. Boys and girls, if I can't get you to escape now. Boys and girls, be mine. I'll take you to my dreamland. Now you're mine. I'll take you to our
All right, that was Milkman by Deerhoof. And before that, we had Panda Panda Panda. Both great records by Greg Saunier and company, the wonderful band known as Deerhoof. Got into more of the actual record stuff this time. Hope that was enjoyable for folks. The last time it was a delightful ramble last time. I think it was kind of cooler getting into the... Why am I doing a post game on my own show? Whatever. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. I enjoyed that as well. I'll come on again. We'll talk about the stuff done in the last decade. That's all worthwhile too and very cool. And I want to make sure that we talk about that at some point. But hey, thanks for coming in. Thanks for watching the show. Watching the show. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. The show airs Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific on RadioNope.com. ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. Patreon.com/Protonic Reversal to get new episodes sooner and support the show. $1 a month will get you there. Otherwise, always free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. Thanks everyone for sharing the episodes around, liking the show, and liking the show, and doing reviews and things. It helps people find it. That's awesome, and I always appreciate that. I genuinely appreciate that. There's a bunch more cool stuff coming. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
Stay safe out there.
Can you hear me now? Out on
And take it easy.
28, you're dark and lonely. You got my radio on.
Take it easy.
Hear me now.
Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl! It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, radio on. Can you hear me now? This is a real goddamn emergency!